All right. So we're going to try this and see if it is a little better. So if you can hear me, please let me know. Looks like I've got a good working mic now. I don't know. We've had some service interruptions in our area lately because of some storms that we had to go through. So I'm not 100% sure if this is. If we just had a bad feed or if it was actually the mic, but I didn't really mess around with it. I just went ahead and changed out the mic anyways, just to make sure. Um, yeah, we had some nasty stuff go through here last week, and it seems like the it's just not been good. So again, sorry about the delay. I know the live stream is important to all of you, so hopefully this fixes our problems. If you're still having problems hearing me, or if you notice any problems during the feed, just let me know, and we will take it from there. So we were originally talking about some of the prices that we've been seeing in our area and throughout the United States. Really, what we're seeing is a simultaneous change where the prices of lamb is dropping and the prices of goat kids is dropping significantly, but the cost of feed and everything else is going up. And I think really what's going on is that we have a lot of people that are bailing on us, and I can't really blame them. We've got friends that are on West Texas that are telling us, they're spending $150 a round bale, and I think people are getting a little panicky. And so when you have this increase in supply, it's obviously going to drop the demand a little bit. Still, right now, the prices of these ewes and does is still up there. But I suspect we keep seeing prices like we saw last weekend at the sale barn, which is like $1.10 a pound live weight. I haven't seen anything like this in a long time. Um, if you can get your hands on any hay that has good to decent nutritional value, I would highly recommend that you get your hands on it and do the best that you can do, to take care of your animals and plan ahead. I don't see prices going down in regard to grain and feed and things like that. So, do your best to get a handle on that and do what you can do. This may be a really great time for some of you that are just getting started to actually get your hands on some decent breeding stock and to bring it on board. We posted a video last night. If you haven't checked it out yet, please do. We posted a video last night talking about size, shape, and structure, generally speaking, with our males, and that goes hand in hand with our rams and our bucks. Both of those really, that video really did apply to. I know I used rams in the video to talk about that size, shape, and structure, but it really applies to goats as well. And the main thing you want to look at is if you're out there really looking to get a nice big ram or buck, when you look at those front shoulders, you want to make sure that those front shoulders are in line with the legs. And you can see that in the video where I'm pointing that out, how the front shoulders are in line with the legs, and those points of those shoulders aren't way out there. These points are what's going to cause you headaches when you're going to lamb and kid, is they're going to get caught on things and you're going to have problems. And you don't want to be out there pulling babies. And let's be honest, you can't be out there for every single baby, especially if you've got numerous animals. And so you want to give them the best start that you can, and pulling babies is not good for mom and it's not good for the baby. So again, if you haven't checked out that video, make sure that you do. So Warrior Ranch Northwest, he said, we're experiencing a heat wave. Are there any precautions we need to take with our Katahdin sheep? I think any sheep in general is, with heat, is you're going to have to take a precaution with, as far as supporting them and keeping them cool. The best thing you can do is to offer them free choice water, and make sure that they're able to get as much water as they can. Don't ever spray your animals down, especially your wool sheep. That's a huge no-no. It actually is going to make them more hot than if you were to just let them get good airflow. Good airflow is important as well. So if you do have them in some shade or under an overhang, if you can provide them a fan, that's going to do them a lot of good as well. Electrolytes, I'm a fan of blue light. I use blue light. They don't sponsor me. Nobody sponsors me. So you don't ever have to worry about that. I'm a fan of blue light. Blue light is a nutritional supplement that you can put in their water. It's kind of like a Gatorade powder. It's like an electrolyte powder. I want to say you can get it all over the place. You can get packets. I think Valley Vet has them, and other places have them. So check that out. It's called Blue Light, and I believe it's blue and then LITE. So let me type that in. Let me type that in here. And blue LITE, and check that out. It works really well. We give that to our ewes and does the first night when they've lambed or kitted. It seems to help give them a boost, and seems to help keep them hydrated. But yeah, the heat's crazy, and so the sheep and goats can't sweat like you and I do. And so what they do is to evaporate, to get some of that evaporation going on. You may see them doing weird things. You may notice them breathing really, really heavily, and that is normal. So things that you're going to want to watch out for. But yeah, if you can give them shade, that is a huge one. And the wool sheep, do not spray them down. Bad, 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 bad thing. So Melissa says she's in West Tennessee. We have a bit of a drought. Rain is expected this week. If we get it, we could have a second crop of hay. Yeah, we are very, very grateful that we got about 4 inches of rain here just this last week. So we're super excited about that, and we are getting ready to do our second cutting right now. Everything's been kind of weird as far as cuttings are concerned. So bad timing all around. I've had some questions recently about just general medication administration things. Always keep in mind, um, a lot of the stuff that I tell you guys, I don't invent it. I am basically telling you what I've read from other veterinarians or what I've been advised by veterinarians. So, always follow the directions as far as medication administration and what's appropriate. We get a lot of questions specifically about the copper sulfate, where people say, hey, can I give copper sulfate in a different way than you're giving it? Some people want to know if they can feed copper sulfate crystals to their animals. Other people want to know if they can change the formula as far as the consistency. Can they use less water? Things like that. And the answer is, I don't really know. And I'm not going to do it because all of the universities and the studies where they've given the copper sulfate has been given uh, in the manner in which we give it. And I know 100 milliliter oral drench really stinks. It's a lot. Unfortunately, part of the way that it works with that 100 ml drench is that 100 milliliter drenches kind of goes hand in hand with the way that it works. We want to give them a large enough fluid bolus that they are getting the intestinal linings and the stomach linings completely washed, and it's still a relatively low amount of copper in there. Again, copper sulfate through the oral route that we use for worming is not appropriate to meet like dietary copper needs that you would run into with your goats. So you're still going to have to make sure that you're giving them everything that they need from a nutritional standpoint. um, Katad and Romanoff cross use, that's an interesting cross. What would be a good breed for a terminal sire? So that's a great question, and you can run into this with goats as well. um, when you look at size, shape, and structure of your males, it's important for you to understand two things. One is, obviously, what is their growth potential? What does it take to get them up to that size? And then the other thing is, what what's the amount of time that's required to get them up to that size? So here's the problem. You may go to a farm and they may have, let's say, Columbias, or they may have Dorsets that are crossed with Columbias. And you look at these animals and you're like, wow, these things are monstrous. Columbias are one of those really impressive. If you see a full grown one, that's looking you in the eyes, you're like, wow, this thing's monstrous. Well, the thing that they didn't tell you is it took them 2 years to get there. And Columbias are one of those, and I'm not beating up on Columbias. I'm just using this as an example. Columbias are one of those sheep that it's like they stay long and leggy, and they grow and they grow and they grow, and then they start to fill out from there. Kind of like some of you have probably experienced this with, some of you have probably experienced this with um, cattle. Like they'll grow, they'll get longer and taller, and then they tend to fill in. And so some of your sheep tend to do that as well. Other sheep you may run into, their feed conversion ratio just really stinks. Um, so feed conversion ratios you have to watch out for. How much feed is it going to take for you to get to that size? So um, generally speaking, some of the hair sheep, some of the St. Croix, and those seem like they just don't get a very good feed conversion ratio. And so I like to say, if you're looking for a terminal sire, you're just wanting to get a black faced uh, ram. If you're wanting to breed them on something that's going to give you, good growth potential, fast growth, and pretty even growth, you can't really go wrong with a hamp. I think Hampshire or a Hampshire cross is a good way to go. Ile de France, if you wanted to stick with a white face, if you want like good feed conversion ratio and good meat producing, then you could look at an Ile de France for whiteface or a Hamp for blackface. If you're going with hair, then of course, we want to look at probably Dorper. I don't know if you can beat a good Dorper as far as just body size, structure, and feed conversion ratio. So when I say feed conversion ratio, that can get a little confusing. So what I mean is if I feed this animal, a pound of feed, what is that pound of feed going to equate to? And you can see this with different breeds. And I know most of you don't raise different breeds. We do that for you. But I have had baby St. Croix and Katahdins and blackface and whiteface and all of these different breeds side by side getting fed the free choice creep feed day after day after day. And you can see what it does to them. The like a St. Croix, it seems like they eat a lot and they turn into little beach balls on me, but they don't necessarily grow super duper fast. It seems like if I get a wool breed, like maybe a long tall breed like a Columbia, a Lincoln, even Suffolks can do this sometimes. They'll get long and lanky first and then they'll fill out. Where it seems like the Hamps, uh, the South Downs, the Dorsets to a certain degree, Dorpers, those breeds seem to really pack on the meat well. And so when you get them up to 60 pounds, they look like a really well formed 60-pound lamb. And you can run into the same phenomenon with goats. If you get a dairy goat that's bred in with your flock, too strong a dairy, like maybe an Alpine, a La Mancha, something of that nature, a Saanen, an Oberhausley for sure. They're going to look kind of bony and thin, and it takes a while for them to fill out. So you have a couple different things. You can breed that dairy goat into a heavy meat breed like a boar, Kiko, something like that, and get a little bit more structure to them. You just got to be careful how much you're fiddling with it because it will potentially come back to bite you in the rear end. So it's kind of a science experiment in many cases. So in regard to the copper sulfate worming works only for um, gastrointestinal worms such as roundworm, whipworm, and the dreaded barber's pole worm. It isn't going to work against tapeworms. Even back in the day, a long time ago, when we got pre-chemicals, when it came to the tapeworms, we had to treat them with a special um, nicotinic kind of medication, which is a little bit more dangerous. So that's why when we talk about tapeworms, when we talk about our trifecta method that we like to use, especially for those babies, we like to start off with a white wormer like Valbazin or Panicer, and then we move into our clear wormers. Now, generally speaking, um, you don't really have to worry about tapeworms as much with our older sheep and our older goats because they tend to develop a resistance to it as they age. Meningocele worm is a completely different animal, and we are actually going to talk about meningocele worm here in a little bit. So meningocele worm, no, copper sulfate won't touch that either. Again, really narrow field that copper sulfate worming works against, and that is going to be against your gastrointestinal worms, with the exception of tapeworms. All your other parasites, so liver flukes, nasal bots, meningocele worm, lungworms, all that stuff, you're going to need to use something else. For that something else, we generally advise using, if it's nasal bots, Ivomec works really good. And you can also get into the injectable like Dectomax. Um, I'm a big fan of Dectomax. I really enjoy uh, if for those, especially for those of you that have done oral drenches, I'm sure you can appreciate this too. Man, giving a shot is way better than giving an oral drench. You know exactly how much you're giving. You don't have to worry about them spitting it back out on you. If you've ever wormed an animal with oral drench before and had them spit half of it out, you're just like, oh my gosh, how much did they get? Did they get enough? Do I need to give them more? You know, it can turn into quite an ordeal. So so Gabrielle, she had a Son goat that was sold to me in April of 2021. At the time, she was about a month old. Till this day, I have never seen her going to heat. Is this normal for this breed? No, it's not. It's not normal. You know, most of them mature by a certain age, and then others are a little bit later. But she should definitely be going into heat by now. So heat is difficult to see in goats sometimes, and they're in heat generally for a very short amount of time. So while you have males, when you have males in the area, if they're standing for the males, they're basically in estrus. They will not stand for a male if they're not. You may notice some discharge, you may not. You may notice them flagging their tails, you may not. You may notice red swollen labia and things like that, you may not. So there is no like guaranteed this is what a sheep or a goat in heat looks like. The way you really know is when they're standing for that male, and they may only stand for that male for a very short amount of time. So that's where a marking harness really comes in handy. A marking harness really pays its dividends, and the beauty of a marking harness is let's put it into this perspective. Why would we want to use a marking harness? Couple reasons why you want to use a marking harness. First and foremost is you can buy a harness and put the crayon in there. You can pick these up online. You can also use what's called rattle powder, and you can just put some chalk powder on their chest. You can even go to the hardware store and buy chalk line powder and put that on their chest. The idea is we want to see when they get up on these females and they mark them. Now, a male, as you know, will attempt to get up on a female even when she doesn't want him to. And so you may get like these little marks, a little bit of marks. But once that male actually lands that female, you will see lots of marks on her. That mark will be all up on her back, and you will be able to definitively tell the difference between an attempt on the part of your male or an actual landing on the part of your male. So what I like to do is I like to start off with a single color, usually like a yellow or a red, and I turn my males loose and I watch for marks, and I watch for when he marks those females. And usually after a period of about 7 days, he'll have marked all that he's going to mark, and I can write these down. I can write down the tag number of the female, the date that she was marked, and then I don't leave it alone. I don't take the marker off of the male. I don't pull the male out of there. I change the color. So I'm still going to leave him marked. I'm going to change the color of that marking. And so now what I'm watching for is I'm watching for remarks. So if I'm getting remarks, this tells me one of two things is happening. Either, well, one of three things is happening, really. Either my male is infertile and he's not doing his job, the female is infertile and she's not doing her job, or perhaps something happened like, you know, she just lost it. And that does happen. Sometimes they don't take on the first one. What you're going to notice is you're going to notice about, and this varies, you're going to notice a few of your females are going to cycle early, a few of them are going to cycle late, and a majority of them are going to cycle at the same time. But again, what we're watching for is for that remarking. If you see a few remarks, it's not a big deal. If you see all of them getting remarked, you've got a serious problem with your male that you need to figure out. It's normal for a few of them to get remarked, but if you see them remarking and remarking and remarking, you're in big trouble. Hopefully that makes sense. And to be honest with you, we change out our colors until the marking stops. And that way we know. And then the best part of all this is you're going to have your book and you're going to be able to write this down in your book and you're going to have a really good idea of when these females are going to have their babies. And you're not going to have to go through that god awful, stressful, looking at them every day, like, are they going to go? Are they going to go? Are we close? Are we not close? And it's going to save you a lot of time and heartache as well. Plus, it's going to help you out with things like knowing when to vaccinate them, knowing if you need to change up their feed, knowing when to prepare for these babies. Maybe you're going to take a week off of work so you're home when all of these are ready to go. It just depends. So the marking harness is definitely the way to go. um, and I think it's beneficial. So actually, I want to make a video and put out a video on marking harnesses, and I'm going to try to do that real soon, probably by the end of the weekend. So I'm glad the question came up. So all right, Joaquin, what age do you expose you? 7 months, a year, or do you do it by weight? Yeah, that's a great question. So we do it by weight. So different breeds are going to get into sexual maturity at different times. And you're going to experience the same thing with your males. Some males can land a ewe or a doe at 6 months of age. So that's another thing to keep in mind is you always want to be careful how long you're keeping these babies in there, because you'd be surprised. 6 months old, a ram lamb or a buckling can easily land a female. And don't get in the mindset of, oh, she's so tall and he's so short. And no, 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 no. A female will squat for a male. I can tell you a horror story about one of our mascots we had around here for a long time was a beautiful Nigerian dwarf buck named Gilbert. He had this beard like down to the ground, and he went to live with one of our friends. He's still alive and still kicking. Had beautiful babies, and Gilbert was just a love machine, and he would track down anything he could get a hold of. And he bred one year. He got out, and he ended up breeding something like six of our really really nice boars. So that was magical. It could have been worse, but yeah, Gilbert got a hold of a lot of our boars, and we had some issues there. So, oh man, this is awesome. We have our first spammer. I didn't even consider you could have a spammer on here on a live stream, but yeah, here we are. I must be hitting the big time when I know I've got spammers on the live stream. So, anyways, I am getting rid of these right now. All right, good deal. So, anyways, back to business. Okay. So, yeah, you want to go with weight essentially. So, when your females get to 75% of their adult weight, or an estimate, a good quality estimate of 75% of their mature weight, it's okay to turn them out. You just have to really, really pay attention to how much weight they have and how you feed them and things like that. I know on the tack box a few days ago, I posted something on there about breeding females, especially your replacement ewes and your replacement does. So make sure you check that out. Guys, if you are not on the tack box, please think about joining it. It is on Facebook and it's a forum. I post articles on there probably 2, 3, 4 times a week of things that I'm doing research on, and I post for you guys to read. If I post it on there, no kidding, it's probably worth at least looking over. So something for you to keep in mind. But yeah, 75% of mature adult weight. So just try to get an idea based on your breed where you're going to be. Once you hit that weight, you should be okay to go ahead and breed them. We breed a lot of our females the first fall. Of course, this last year we had a lot of March babies, and so we're going to miss that window. I'm probably going to hold a lot of our females over until probably January. Don't get super discouraged if you miss your breeding window. If you really wanted to breed in the fall, and then they're not up to size. It's okay. It's not worth pushing them because it's going to come back and bite you in the rear end. Just take some time, idle them back for a couple more months, maybe breed them in late spring, maybe have fall babies, something like that. You can find a way to work it into your program. If you are nervous about breeding your does or your ewes, consider picking out a smaller buck or a smaller ram to breed them the first time. uh, we actually would breed a Nigerian dwarf on some of our smaller boars the first time. And some people would say, oh, well, that's a waste. No, not really, because people still love to buy them as pets. It allows the mom to have a better, more comfortable birthing experience. It allows us to see what kind of a mom she's going to be. And it lets her kind of get in that cycle of feeding babies and taking care of babies. And you've probably noticed as well, with your mamas, like the first time can be a little rough, but boy, once they learn how to be good moms and they get in there the second time, it makes a heck of a difference. So when I have boar moms, they can be either really good or really bad. A lot of times, if I'm gonna spend money on breed them on one of the huge bucks, or if we're gonna do an artificial insemination or something like that, I'm not gonna drop all that money on a first time mom for artificial insemination. I'll breed her on something small, see how she performs, and kind of get her used to just being a mom and being comfortable. And then the next year, I'll spend the money and or put her on something a little bit bigger. But you got to be fair to them. You got to give them their chance. Um, and see how they're going to do. So hopefully that kind of answers your question. Melissa says Dorpers have a great feed conversion ratio. Yep, but they have short legs. Yes, a solid full animal, just not tall. If you want sheep with more height, I wouldn't recommend them. And yeah, Melissa, absolutely for sure. And you'll get this a lot with South Downs as well. Not the baby doll South Downs that some people are used to seeing, but just South Downs in general. They tend to have a little less airspace underneath them. The thing that's nice about those animals, it seems like those animals that have a little less airspace underneath them really have good muscling, and they kind of grow that muscle as they grow taller and longer. Some of those animals, like we talked about before, like the Columbias, where they're big, tall, and lanky, like it takes forever for them to fill out. We have a friend of ours, a good friend of mine, Wayne. Wayne raises really, really nice Hamps and Suffolks, and they are showing one of our lambs this year in the fair, and it is a Columbia cross. With a black face terminal sire, and the Columbia was literally like off the range off of Montana, and the baby came out when the baby was born. It was 24 pounds, so huge, huge baby. And Wayne took it home, and Wayne really, really knows his stuff when it comes to feeding and growing out club lambs, and they really did a good job with him. And the poor thing looks like a llama. It's just it just did not grow. It grew really tall and it grew really long, but it hasn't filled out yet. So yeah, it basically looks like he's showing a llama at the fair. So that's interesting. I'm sure I'm going to be hearing a lot about that for a while from him. So, but if you're raising for meat, and if you're raising something that you're going to be selling, like at weaning, you know, nobody cares about the airspace. If they got little short legs, or if they're a little bit stubbier, it's not that big of a deal. You would be shocked, even with I've seen some when in goats. I've seen some pygmy. I've seen some pygmy bucks that have bred like a boar doe, and man, you want to talk about some stout little meat carcasses. I know it sounds kind of goofy and it's hard to wrap your head around, but I've seen some wild stuff out there. So don't be afraid to try out some different stuff and see what works for you on your farm. It never hurts. All right, Cheryl, after the initial start of the trifecta method, how often do you use your copper sulfate for maintenance? As little as possible. And so worming is such a great question, Cheryl. Um, Worming is one of those things that we want to keep it as available as we can, by avoiding having animals get, or having these worms get resistance to our chemical warmers, things like that. But at the end of the day, keeping good quality records and paying attention to how often your animals have to be wormed is extremely, extremely important. And that is something that is often overlooked. So, what you're going to see when you worm your sheep or you worm your goats is that most of them are going to respond to a worming very, very well. And then a few of them are not. You're going to successfully, let's say you have 10 ewes or 10 does, and you successfully worm those 10 ewes or those 10 does, and everything's fine. You get the worm load out of them, you get them back up to snuff. Your job isn't done there. Now what you have to do is you have to monitor them. And we say, ideally every month, but I know that doesn't work out for all of you. But I would say as often as reasonable for you, I want you to go out and check them. And what you're going to find is, when you're first getting started, maybe closer to 20%, but you're going to find once you get going, about 10% of these animals, they're going to go right back to being pale again. They're going to go right back to having a worm load again. And you're going to worm them and they're going to go right back. Um, I have I have a couple animals on my farm. I have a ewe in particular that I can think of, and I have a doe in particular that I can think of that I don't know if I've ever wormed them. To be honest with you, like as an adult, and I'm talking years. I don't know if I've ever done it. But boy, I can tell you that I get rid of animals every year that just don't make the cut. They just, for whatever reason, I worm them and I get them cleaned up, and then they go right back to being wormy again. And this is a huge, huge problem because they're carrying around a ton of parasites. They're dumping eggs everywhere that they're going, and they're just not thrifty. So when you look at the copper sulfate wormer, yeah, I mean, you can worm your animals every month with it. I'm a firm believer in that. That if you wanted to, you could worm those animals every month with that, and keep them free of worms. But the question then becomes, do you really want to? Because if you fall into that trap to where you're keeping these animals on your farm that you're having to worm all the time, they're going to have babies that you're going to have to worm all the time, and then these things just get out of hand. Um, the other thing that I feel is overlooked that I really want you to consider is what happens to the animals when you worm them. Now, I know some of you have ran across this before, and it means something. If you have an animal, um, well, let me back up. I had a friend of mine that is raising a newer flock of goats. They're all adults. He has them. They all look fairly red in their eyelids. And he said, I got this new group of goats. As far as worming is concerned, what do you think I should do? Now, intuitively, a lot of us would say, don't worm them. If they look red in the eyes, don't worm them. My response to him is, I said, I want you to worm all of them. I want you to get your copper sulfate wormer, and I want you to worm all of them. And my reasoning is this: out of that 30, 40 does that he just picked up, I guarantee it, even though they all look red in the eyelids, when he worms those goats, what's going to happen is one or two of them, hopefully not, but it's going to happen. And it did happen. One of them just blew up with bottle jaw. It just wiped her out. Uh, she was red in the eyelids. Everything looked good. He hit her with the copper sulfate, and she got scours and she got bottle jaw, and just all went downhill really, really fast. Didn't kill her or anything like that, but it really knocked her back. And so then you sit back and you look at that and you say, what in the heck is going on here? Well, she had adapted to carrying a worm load very, very well. Her body had adjusted to carrying that worm load very, very well, to where she was still able to maintain her hemoglobin. She was still able to stay thrifty. She wasn't getting scours. She wasn't getting anything, but she was carrying all those worms. And everywhere she was going on that farm, she was dumping worms and dumping worms and dumping worms. And so by him doing that, by him worming all of those animals, which I understand is counterintuitive. We don't want to worm healthy animals, but given this situation, since he had no baseline to go off of, he had no way to know, that showed that doe's true colors. And then we were able to look at her and say, she needs to go, because even though she can tolerate that worm load, chances are she's running around and she's dumping it everywhere. And you see that with the worms, you see that with Coccidia. You have these silent carriers in your flock, and it's really, really hard to flush them out sometimes. So I guess the long-winded way to answer your question is, how often do you use the copper sulfate? Well, you use it as often as you have to, but the long-term goal is, we want to get to where you're hardly using it at all. Once you go through the cycle, once you go through that trifecta method, to where you're warming them with the white wormer, you're hitting them with the Dectamax, and then you're hitting them with the copper sulfate, you're going to see a few of them just don't take well to a warming, and they're going to want you to worm them all the time because they can't keep clean. Those are the ones you want to get rid of. Once you get rid of them, things start to get better, and then they get a little better, and then they get a little better. Now, some people would say, well, you don't want to give them any worming if you don't have to any time of the year. And I still think it's warranted. I still think it's a warranted expense to hit your animals with Dectamax at least once a year. And the reason for that is for these subclinical infections of things like liver fluke, lungworm, nasal bots, all this other stuff that oral drench of copper sulfate really can't touch. That's where I think you should do maintenance doses of Dectamax with your herd or your flock, maybe once to twice a year, and that's okay. You know, because we're not having to use that repeatedly for things like gastrointestinal worms. That's where our copper sulfate bridges that gap for us. So we're maintaining that potency and that activity in the Dectamax to where it works for us when we need it to. So that was a really great question, and I'm glad you asked that, because that kind of helps to put things into perspective for people. Just because you can worm once a month doesn't mean you should, and surely we wouldn't want that on our flock. The other thing to consider is your males. If you're gonna get a breeding male, you really, really, ideally, you want a lamb that you raised or a kid that you raised on your farm that you know how well they respond to worming, and how often they need to be wormed, because that animal is going to make up 50% of your flock or your herd. And it's important to know, how often does this animal really require worming. So, what would you suggest for a deworming schedule for sheep and goats? I think I kind of answered that there, Jake, in a roundabout way. I feel like you can very easily get your gastrointestinal worms under control within a year or two, utilizing copper sulfate, and getting them started in the right way. As long as you're hitting them with the white wormer when they're juveniles, and getting the tapeworm out, the tapeworm issue kind of resolves itself as they age. And then once you get up to speed, you can kind of keep an eye on them and hit them with the copper sulfate. And again, depending on your area and what's prevalent, if nasal bots are prevalent, if Lysin keds are prevalent, if liver flukes or whatever are prevalent, you're going to have to talk to those producers in your area. You may have to do a maintenance dose of Dectamax, or fill in the blank, Sidectin or something, once or twice a year, just to keep them free of all those other parasites that are out there. Um, John wants to know, what's a good brand of marking harness or brand to stay away from. Um, Yeah, I heard they don't stay on the Rams. People buy them and don't like them. John, we'll post online for you um, here soon what we use, and let you know. We'll post it online. I don't know the brand off the top of my head, so I will keep you posted on that. Just watch for me to post something for you here. Watch for me to post something for you here soon. So, man, while I was talking, we got spammed like crazy. Um, I apologize about that for you guys. Holy smokes. All right. Dwarfers are awesome meat tanks. Yeah. Even Putin loves them. Wow. Yeah, Kindig, sorry about that. I I almost need like somebody to monitor things for me while I'm talking. So, anyways, let's see what other questions we have here. What is white Dorper textiles a good cross? Yeah, textiles a great um, Texel's a great animal. White Dorpers are great. We've got a couple White Dorpers here on the farm. As far as I'm concerned, with what I see, the difference between the White Dorper and the traditional black-headed Dorpers, I don't see much of a difference in carcass size. Maybe some of you have, but uh, that's up to you. So I've seen a couple questions like when do you turn the females back out for breeding, and when do you wean the lambs? So as far as uh, when do you turn the ewes or does back out for breeding? Some people that run a very intensive breeding cycle will actually put cedars in their ewes and does at weaning. So as soon as they pull the babies, they're putting a cedar back in them, and they're doing that to get them back into breeding. Uh, I do not advise doing that. I think that's a bad thing. So, I think they need a little bit of time. I think they need a little bit of a break. So, a cedar is a progesterone suppository that you put in these animals to help them go into estrus on demand. Is what a cedar is. So, a lot of producers, as soon as they wean, they put them in and they go. And I think they need a little bit of a break. That's just me, but you're going to have to see what works for your. Um, you're going to have to see what works for you. So, as far as weaning is concerned, uh, you are going to have to. Um, you're going to have to see what works for you. If you're going much longer than 12 weeks, I just don't think that's good. We try to wean our lambs and our good kids at about 8 weeks. Um, so that's up to you. As far as if you're going out past 12 weeks, I think that's excessive. I know no, they won't wean themselves. I hear that a lot. They're like, oh, eventually they'll wean themselves. They may, but it's going to be like you're going to be so far out there time wise. If you were to keep, let's say you were just to keep a lamb together with the mom and just let them go and live together happily and see, sometimes those lambs will nurse off those moms until the mom goes into estrus again to have her. I mean, they could be on her for 8, 9 months, and that's just not that's not good. So, what's the margin of error when doing IM in the neck? I've seen your videos on giving IM shots. Specific place in the middle of the neck. What if I accidentally miss the target? There's a pretty big there's a pretty big window there. There's a pretty big margin of error. So the basically the large vessels go through the very front part, the front lower part of the neck, right here. So the carotid and the jugular run right about in this area. So we usually give the shot up here in the back part of the neck. So if you were to draw an imaginary line between the middle of the back of the neck where the spine is and right about at the side perpendicular, if you go right in between those two, you should be fine. I wouldn't recommend using super long needles. You shouldn't have to use anything longer than about a 3/4 inch 18 gauge, but that should work out fine. A lot of producers give IM shots in the neck, and the reason for that is they don't want to damage any of the muscle in the hindquarters. So something for you to keep in mind. Um, I still don't give all of my shots in the neck. Most of my shots that I give, honestly, are subcutaneous. And most of my subcutaneous shots are going to be given over the ribs. They're in kind of that front armpit area. And I try to give my sub-Q shots on the non show side of the animal, because, the show side of the animal, which would be the right side of the animal, um, it can leave a little granuloma, it can leave a little knot. So I think it's important to try to give that shot on the non-show side, just in case it leaves a little bit of a nodule. So, Cheryl says, I would like to change from the big box store feed recipe to cracked corn and rolled oats with the topper. How long do you think I have to mix a transition feed so they do okay? Usually, one bag serves them okay. So, you know, I would give them a blend. Normally, if I'm going to switch my animals up between one feed to another, take 25 pounds of each feed. I mix them together. I give them a good 50-50 mix of it. And then from there, I just transition right to the new feed, unless it's like something profound. Um, if I see something profound, a profound change, let's say I'm going from like 12% protein to like 20, or I'm going from a really heavy grain feed to maybe like a straight alfalfa meal grain, that might be something that you want to slow it down a little bit more at. But for all intents and purposes, switch it up uh, with one bag. Just do 25 pounds of one, 25 pounds of the other. And then after that, you should be good. It's not uncommon for your animals to get a little bit of scours when you're doing the switch, but it should be relatively transient to where it's just going to last for a little bit and then they'll go right back to normal. We can usually tell when our lambs or our goat kids start on creep feed. We offer free choice creep feed for our lambs and goat kids from birth going forward until they hit 80 pounds of weight, and then we pull them off of it. And we can usually tell when the babies are starting on creep feed because they'll get a little bit of scours. It's pretty common for them. So you're like, man, I wonder if the lambs have started really going to town on the creep feed yet. And you go out there one day and then you see that they do in fact have scours. So yeah, I see someone said you're going to need some moderators. Yeah, I agree. So I'll probably reach out to some of you that are on here um, every week. I know there's a few of you that I recognize that are on here all the time. I'll probably reach out to some of you and give some of you moderator status moving forward. That way, when goofballs come on here and do goofball things that goofballs do, you guys can just start punting them off of here, because it's hard for me to talk and pay attention to this and read all the things that are popping up in the feed at the same time. So yeah, good call on that. So KM, you may be one of my first ones up to be the moderator. You never know. Kindig, hi Kindig. Going to want to purchase some sheep, lamb, goat kids in about a year. When is a good time to start stocking my mini farm? Spring. Spring is a good time to start. I tell people all the time. I say, Cody, thanks, I appreciate it. So I tell people, springtime is a good time to start. Sometimes I get people that are a little bit really hyper and they're like, man, I want to get started. I want to get started right now. And I want to start with like 40 animals. And I think the best way to do it is just start off with a handful. If if you're not in a super big hurry and you just want to kind of get your feet wet and get a feel for things, and you don't want your family to dislike you strongly, um, I'm just saying, it can be stressful. It can be stressful. So if you would be willing to start off with two females and one male, maybe two ewe lambs and one ram lamb, or two does and one buck, I think that'd be a great place to start. And then go from there, because that way you can go through a full cycle with them, have them for the year, feed them, go through all the shots, go through pregnancy, delivery, all of that. And then once you have those babies and you learn all about that, and you can kind of get it down on your own at your own pace, then go ahead and if you still decide that you like it and you want to do it, then go on and expand from there. I think that's a great way. To start off. um, so that's my 2 cents on that. Take it as you will. Cheryl, what's the best thing to use against flies? Probably permethrin. If you're going to be treating your animal, so if you're going to be docking tails, tagging ears, doing any of that stuff during warm weather where you're creating a wound, Catron spray is probably one of the best things that you can use. And really, that's permethrin based. And I still to this day don't know if it's pronounced. Hey, you guys noticed like there's all these things in these medicines? It's like, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but this is the way I pronounce it. So Catron, some people call it Catron, although it's spelled with a C. So I'm just like, hey, I'm just calling it. I'm just calling it Catron. So I'm gonna write it down here for you, Catron. You can buy that online, and it's an aerosol spray for flies that works really, really good. If you're going to be doing large areas around your farm, then you can use just permethrin based spray. But really, honestly, chickens uh, are probably the best thing for flies. We have lots of free range chickens that run around. And chickens do come with their drawbacks. Chickens can be, they just kind of poop where they want. And so you got to watch out for that. You got to make sure that they're not pooping in your water and not pooping in your creep feed and things like that. But boy, they do a heck of a job of keeping the flies down. There are additives that you can put in. You can put in your feed that will kill flies, and I can't think of what it's called on the top of my head, but there is additives you can put in, like your mineral, that will actually kill maggots as well. Um, and yeah, swallows is another one. Our swallows just naturally nest in the top of in our barn beams and things like that, and they're going around. But guinea fowl, if you're wild enough to do that and you can handle the yelling, guineas are like little insect eating machines. So I highly recommend that. Any birds you can't go wrong with. So keep that in mind. Brian will help out. Thanks, guys. Yeah, I'll reach out to some of you, and we can have. That's the first time this has ever happened to me that I've had uh, like spamming like that. So that's very interesting. So yeah, I'll reach out to some of you, and we can give some of you guys um, moderator status and see how that goes. So, anyways, there, it's just that easy. I just tried it out. I just made Brian a moderator. Here, I'll make Cody a moderator. There we go. All right, guys. If you see anybody else hop on, just punt them off of here. Gabrielle, I have lots of silkies and they're not flyers. So yeah, you don't have to worry about them pooping in buckets. We can't do silkies up here in the northern areas because when they get wet during the winter, they just turn into little popsicles. Unfortunately, they don't shed water too well. So we're getting close to the end here. I wanted to take a moment to talk to you guys about Meningocele worm and why it's an issue and what you need to look out for. So, for those of you that aren't familiar with Meningocele worm is a nasty, nasty bug that what they do. Essentially, the Meningocele worm, the name comes from the meninges, and that's the fluid that's around the spine and the brain, the cerebral spinal fluid. And so, what ends up happening is it's almost like tapeworms in the fact that it requires a couple different hosts. So this is carried by white-tailed deer, and it really doesn't take care of, or excuse me, it really doesn't do much damage in the white-tailed deer. uh, what it actually does is it is carried by the white-tailed deer. The white-tailed deer poop it out, and then it's picked up by slugs and snails, things like that that are in your pasture, and then your animals ingest this, and basically the worm forms inside the body of a sheep or a goat, and especially camelids, alpacas, and llamas get this really, really bad. So essentially, what ends up happening is white-tailed deer spread this. It's picked up by these slugs and snails and stuff in your pasture. The sheep or goat ingests it, and once this thing goes through its life cycle, essentially what ends up happening is it goes into the spine, and it works its way up to the brain. And once it gets into the brain, you start seeing all kinds of neurological degenerative issues. They can lose eyesight. They can go just bat crap crazy. They can start spinning in circles. They can lay down and hunch their head back over their back. They can look like they have tetanus. There can be all kinds of problems that they can get. It's very difficult to know for sure if that's what they have. It can mimic the signs of tetanus. It can mimic the signs of um, meningitis. It can mimic the signs of listeria. So it's difficult for you to know. But what's important for you to know is that once they get it, it is almost always fatal. And so if you know you have meningocele worm in your area, unfortunately, you are probably going to eventually lose one or two animals to it. If you have camelids, llamas, and alpacas in areas where there's white-tailed deer, it is a real bear to take care of. Um, this is this is a real problem because here's the solution. At least here's what they say. So I've talked to a lot of veterinarians in our area. We used to raise alpacas as well, and we had them come down with Meningocele worm. I recall vividly the first time the veterinarian came out to our property. She told me, she said, "Yep, it's Meningocele worm." She said, "You didn't do anything wrong. They just get it. It's really hard to combat." And she said, "I have never seen one survive." And that kind of stuck with me. And what you'll normally see, what we do for treatment is we worm them. However, the treatment is also the cause of death for them in many cases. Because these worms are in the cerebral spinal fluid, they can cause nerve damage in the spine or in the brain. And when you worm them, you guys know how we talk about worming shock, and when the gastrointestinal worming load is dropped. Well, in meningocele worm, those worms are killed as well, but now it creates swelling and toxins in the cerebral spinal fluid. So it's going to cause swelling of the brain, swelling in the spine column, and the animal's actually going to get worse. So when you worm that animal, you'll see them get slightly better just for maybe a 6-7 hour window, and then they'll just crash on you. And you usually end up losing them. We've tried anti-inflammatory medications, heavy doses of anti-inflammatory medications such as um, dexamethasone. We've tried lots of different anti-inflammatory medications, and they just don't seem to work. So it is more rare in sheep and goats than it is in camelids. And the answer is, and what they tell people that raise camelids a lot of times is they said you need to treat your animals with a monthly dose of injectable ivermectin. Well, you can already see what the problem with this is. If you're giving ivermectin monthly, it's not going to take you very long to completely destroy uh, any worms or worm resistance that you may have on the farm to that medication. And so many of these medications are so closely related to one another that, boy, we sure don't want to find ourselves in a situation where we're having to do that. So there is no really good answer. So you're probably thinking, okay, great, thanks, buddy. Then why are you telling me this? Well, I'm telling you this because if you live in an area where there's white-tailed deer, and if you see white-tailed deer out in your pastures and places like that, which you're going to because you have delicious things for them to eat there, um, if you ever have a situation happen where you get these neurological symptoms in your animals, that seems like it just doesn't make sense. Obviously, if you're vaccinated against tetanus, you should not be seeing tetanus in your animals. Obviously, if you're vaccinated against Clostridium, you should not be seeing Clostridium in your animals. And if it's the middle of the summer, you're probably not going to be seeing things like listeria and these other bugs. So something that you want to keep in mind when you see these animals down, and you see these symptoms, and ultimately you lose one of these animals to these symptoms, I want you to know that quite possibly what you're dealing with is meningocele worm. And very unfortunately, I would love to tell you that there's a cure for it. Um, and it's not all doom and gloom, but really, it really is. The few animals that I've personally heard of or seen that survived it, there have been a few animals that I've known of that survived it, had long term damage, neurological damage, that plagued them for the rest of their life. So it's just like any other neurological damage that we incur as humans. Generally speaking, it's going to take a long time to recuperate, and chances are it's not going to be it's not going to be you know successful. So, all right. So Kindig, yeah, fawn was in my field 3 months ago. The worms are there for a long, long time. I've read varying studies, but I read things up to 8 months. I've read things that said they were in there up to a year. So it's very difficult to know. I will do more research on the meningocele worm to give you guys a little bit more up to speed information on that. Check out on the Tack box again. If you're not on the Tack box, please hop on there. I post articles at least 3 to 4 times a week on there that are really good articles written by people far smarter than I am that tell you things. Again, most of the stuff that I tell you guys is not. I don't come up with this stuff. I'm just I'm doing research, and I'm telling you what I'm reading from veterinarians. I sit here and read fun things like this big honking book here, the Merck Vet Manual. If you want some heavy duty bedtime reading, that's a good one to get. And again, this thing right here, if you have not got this yet, Pipestone's Veterinary Guide to Sheep and Goats, you can pick this up on Premier One. I know they sell it there. I am not a huge fan of Premier One. Some stuff they sell is awesome. Some stuff they sell as garbage. Um, but that's a great book, the Pipestone Veterinary Guide to Sheep and Goats. So if you are inclined to want something that's worth your money, I would advise that. If I could tell you somewhere else to get it, I would. I don't know anybody else that sells it. Pipestone absorbed, or excuse me, Premier One absorbed Pipestone a number of years ago, and so they may very well be the only people that can carry it. Do you guys have any other questions or anything else that's weighing on your mind this week? I apologize for the problem that we had, and actually now that I've got the headset on, I kind of like the headset a little bit more. I don't really know exactly what to do with my hands now, and it's kind of weird not having a microphone in front of my face, but yeah, I kind of like it. If there's anyone in particular that you guys really enjoy listening to or watching or talking to, or anyone that you feel has a lot to share, please let me know. I am going to be reaching out and trying to talk to other people. I have tried really, really hard to get some people to come on our live stream. Um, I would like to do more like interview style live streams, and people are scared to death to do live streams. Live stream is tough because you either know what you're talking about or you don't, and if you don't, there is no edit. So if I mumble or stumble or say the wrong thing, you guys are going to know in a hurry. And I've reached out to some people, and they're like, "Yeah, no, I'm not interested in doing a live stream." Um, and then a few people that I've reached out to said, "Yeah, if you want to do a live stream and pay me, then I'll come on your live stream." So yeah, if you can think of anyone that you would like me to try to get on a live stream, please let me know. You can send me an email. I will write. It's just customer service at linessafarms.com. I will type that in here so you guys can have it. At linessafarms.com. All right. So you can email us there anytime. Let me know what you think. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, let us know. And again, make sure you check out the Tack box. Rick, great show. Thanks. Cheryl, what is the best thing to keep away Coccidia? So the best thing to keep away Coccidia, it's probably a multitude of things, really. So we kind of talked about it earlier with our carriers. You're always going to have that percentage of animals on your farm that are going to be shedding Coccidia. So we like to offer Coccidia preventative medication, and that can be in multiple forms. Um, that can be Dectomax, that can be Bovatec, that can be multiple Rumensin, that can be multiple different feed additives that can help. They either work as Coccidia stats or they're Coccidia cidal. So when you see something followed by stat, like a bacteriostatic means it'll prevent bacteria from growing, but it doesn't kill it. If you see bactericidal, that means that it actually kills bacteria. So I'm using that as an example for like cleaning solutions or injectable medications that you may get. So again, stat means stop, cidal means kill. So when you're looking at Coccidia medications, you'll want to do some research on those medications and see if it says it's a coccidiostat or a coccidiocidal. And that will tell you how they work. Ideally, if we can catch our females about a month prior to kidding or lambing, and we can start feeding them a coccidiostatic medication and help them from shedding and spreading that coccidia. It gives their babies enough of a head start that once they get going, uh, and they start eating their own creep feed, they can be medicated as well. So that's probably one of the best ways to do it. The other way is obviously keeping things as clean as possible, but cleanliness isn't necessarily going to eliminate coccidia. Eliminating coccidia, killing coccidia, there's a couple drugs. There's some nasty drugs like Corid, and I call it a nasty drug just because it's hard on their body, but Corid is very, very effective. There are some off-label drugs that you can use for coccidia as well. The problem with them is that they're extremely expensive. Um, so and we can get into that next week. I can talk to you guys. I think next week I'm going to spend some time talking to you guys about off-label drugs because there's a ton of them out there that are used, and there's no sense in me hiding it from you guys because you need to know about it. You're going to be exposed to it. Eventually, someone's going to come up to you and be like, "Why aren't you using this drug for your sheep or your goats?" And I think that's important for us to talk about. That way, at least you can make an educated decision on your own if you want to attempt to use it or if you don't. Helen. Hello, Helen. I had a buck escape. I like how you put that in quotations. To the girl side, some of them have babies. How do I tell if they are bred back? There's blood work that you can do. You can do blood work and send it into labs that will tell you if the animal is pregnant. Unfortunately, they can't tell you if it is they can't tell you if it is how far along it is or how many they're having. Ultimately, the best way to tell is to have your veterinarian come on site and do a ultrasound pregnancy check. They can tell you about how far along the animal is. They can tell you how many uh, babies the animal is carrying, and they can give you an approximate due date. Um, so that's your best bet. There are, um, I'm not a fan of it. We don't do it here on our farm. There are medications that you can give to cause them to lose the babies. If you wanted to go that route, I don't even really know enough about it to speak intelligently about it. So that would be something you would have to talk to your veterinarian about. Um, but ultrasound is pretty much the gold standard, and that would be how I would want to go. So, um, Conrad, our feed guy. I don't know if that was directed towards someone else or if that was directed towards me. I am my feed guy. So Helen, we don't have a vet anywhere out there. Okay, I understand that. I will post a link on our website or on the tack box for you, Helen, um, soon, within the next few days. That'll give you a place where you can mail in a blood sample that you can take, and it'll tell them. It'll tell you if they're pregnant or not. So it's not the best, but I can get you something that you can work with. Gabrielle Baycox, yeah, we Baycox is not available in the United States, but the medication is that you find in Baycox, and I want to make sure I spell it correctly. Uh, Basically, it's tiltralazil, and we'll get into that next week. Tiltralazil, toltral, or excuse me, toltrazuril. I was pronouncing it incorrectly. I apologize. Is the active ingredient in Baycox, and it is a coccidiocidal medication, and it will wipe out a lot of coccidia. And as you said, it is extremely expensive. So, um, Cheryl, I put goat medication in their feed and still had to get it. So vet has me treating all the babies for coccidia. Okay. You probably got some pretty heavy worm loads in there, or maybe they weren't getting enough of the medication. It's hard to say. Sometimes you can just have a really heavy shedding female that really drops a lot of coccidia. Other times, you may just have a situation where the babies just didn't get to the creep feed fast enough, or to the medicated feed fast enough, and they just picked it up. So that's where Gabrielle, that's the medication that I was talking about. So that's the active ingredient in Baycox. That medication you can give to goats and to lambs, and you can treat them at a rate of about 1 ml for every 5 pounds, and it will basically nuke any coccidia that they have in their system. But again, you are going to pay an exorbitant amount of money for it. So I think that is it. So again, I apologize that we had the problems this week with the feed, and we've got that worked out, so it's not going to happen again. So next week we'll be able to start at our normal scheduled time of 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. I really appreciate all you guys coming online here. Yep, Kindig, that's why I said it was used off-label. So off-label means that it is not used for that animal, or not used for that purpose. So that is why I was saying it was off-label for sheep and goats, because it is not designed for those animals. So anyways, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time next week. Look forward to seeing all of you then. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please let me know. Again, look out for our new videos coming out. And check out the Tack box. So it was great talking with you guys. As always, I really appreciate your time that you spend with me here once a week. So I look forward to seeing all of you again really soon. So I'm Tim from Linessa Farms, Specialty in Heirloom Livestock. Thanks for joining me again today. And I look forward to seeing all of you again next time.